Please help me by giving a very warm welcome to Albie Sachs today with Kingsley Abbott for a conversation I'm sure we'll all very much enjoy. Thank you so much for coming here today, Albie.
Well, thanks for coming, Albie. It's such a pleasure to have you here and to host you at the University of London. And I'm so pleased that we managed to make this work, because it arose out of a conversation that you and I had only a few weeks ago in Cape Town, and you mentioned that you were coming to London, and I said how honoured we would be if you had some time to come and talk to us. And for those of you who don't know, Albie has just landed in London and came straight from the airport to here, and is now sitting in this chair, and that in itself is an inspiration. So as you've all heard, Albie has a long association with the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, but also with our friends at the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. And so I just wanted to welcome you back to Bloomsbury, welcome you back to Russell Square, welcome you back to these institutes which have been a small part of your life. And I thought it might be nice just to ask you some general questions about your relationship with us, your relationship with these institutes in this special part of London. And in your wonderful interview with our senior fellow Martin Platt, who's here tonight, in 2019, you mentioned that Russell Square held a really important place in your heart because you did most of your legal research there for your PhD in 1971. And so I thought it would be interesting to ask you just how much you recall of that time in your life. What were you doing? Who was Albie Sachs in 1971? And what was it like being a student in Bloomsbury at that time?
So I came twice to this area, twice as a refugee. The first time I was a psychological wreck. I'd been in solitary confinement for 168 days in South Africa. I kind of got through, ran miles and miles and miles to the sea, jumped into the water, but something inside me broke. And I'm about to be thrown out of legal practice as a barrister in Cape Town. And I'm feeling very down. I'm leaving my country with friends of mine in jail, Robben Island, elsewhere. I'm on what's called an exit permit. I can leave, and it's condition I don't come back. And I'm motivated by two things to do a PhD. The one was, I want to get out of law. Been there, done that, exciting. People should have more than one occupation in life. And I needed like a bridging time. And I do a PhD on the strange phenomenon, creature, the South African judiciary. Erudite, thoughtful, learned, using concepts of justice and equity and fairness. That very same institution is sending people to jail because they were out on the streets at night after curfew hour, because they didn't produce a pass to a police officer on demand when the police officer came into their home or stopped them in the streets. That evicted people from their homes because they weren't white, and white people wanted that area for development. And that banned books, that banned films, that banned pieces of theatre, that controlled our minds and everything. All of that's done through the law, through the same judiciary. How can one institution have two such completely contradictory manifestations? How does it function? And I'd worked there for 9 years, feeling those contradictions. I felt that's an interesting thing. The other thing is I didn't want to write another exam. I used to be okay with exams, got a gold medal for English, which was unheard of for a lawyer getting a gold medal for English, until I discovered revolution. That took over, and I would just swat at the end of the year a couple of crazy weeks in a sense of terror and panic, and get through the exam. I didn't want to do that again. So I decided a PhD is the way to escape doing exams. And I'm going to reminisce today. That's why I'm here, I think.
Yes, you are.
One story leads to another.
Take your time.
And the person I met in England was Robert Burley, who had been headmaster of Eton. They called him Red Robert. I think to be read at Eton, you don't have to be very, very revolutionary. But he was anti-fascist in that powerful way that kind of upper-class Brits can be. And it's very formidable with the voice, the booming voice, but a real deep heart. He hated fascism. He hated injustice because of World War II and so on. And after leaving Eton, he'd gone to teach at a school in Soweto. And he'd been there for quite some time. And he picked up the passion of our struggle, not just the detestation of racism, but the passion of the people who were resisting. And he felt attuned to them. And it was very, very wonderful. And he gave what he had to give. He had contacts. And the contact that he had was with Sussex University, very new then, interdisciplinary, very open, with quite a few South African connections. And they had a center for the study of persecution. And the next thing I know, I'm registered at the University of Sussex to do a PhD with a Colonel G.I.A.D. Draper, who'd been a prosecutor at Nuremberg, as my one supervisor, and Professor Norman Cohn, the other. He'd written a book called Pursuit of the Millennium that had been very, very well known and powerful, dealing with the children's crusades in the 13th, 14th century. You couldn't get further away from apartheid South Africa than that. But the theme in common was, why do so many ordinary people go along with crazy ideas? That was the basic theme. What's that got to do with Russell Square? It seemed nothing, except all the materials were around here. Living in London, I'd go down to Sussex once a week, but most of my intellectual activity would be in London. And Institute of Advanced Legal Studies, very, very important. And a little further away, the Royal Commonwealth Society Library. Lots of historical material there, wonderful material. But my physical base would be round about Russell Square. And it was a wonderful space for me, because it's a space of thinking people, of learning. It happened that there was a statue of Gandhi not far away, which lent a certain vibe that I felt very, very attracted to. And there's so many colleges and so many, I know we could get a good meal. I'm trying to remember now. It was where I studied, so you get the best luncheon in one of the colleges, and maybe the best seminars in another college, and the best something else somewhere else. It's a whole kind of range, a whole sort of area. And so it became a kind of an intellectual home for me. And part of the fun of it was there was no danger involved. We had a marvelous curator of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Africa in Cape Town. The museum is still there. It's an amazing space, a grain silo, beautifully converted into a museum. Sadly, she passed about 2 months ago. But she said, a project, if it's not risky, it's not worth doing. So my thesis was risky. But it didn't mean I'm living with risk. After years of living with risk, will the doorbell go? Will I be raided? Will I be thrown into jail? It was wonderful when your only risk is you can make a fool of yourself at a seminar. It's a much nicer risk, much less formidable one to take. So I think back with real warmth of that phase. Norman Cohen said, Albie, you're 31, you know what you want to do. Don't come to him for advice on my thesis. I only once asked him about one chapter, should I put it in or not, and his eyebrow went up a little bit, and I didn't put it in. The closest I got to supervision from him. In terms of Draper, I got very, very strong, firm advice. Mr. Sachs, he always called me Mr. Sachs, which wasn't a Sussex affectation at all. A good thesis makes a bad book, and a good book makes a bad thesis. I said, thank you for that advice, and ignored it completely. I couldn't see why a good book shouldn't be scientific, and a good thesis shouldn't be readable. So I wrote it as a book. It's not this one.
No.
That comes to my
That comes later.
second stories. So that's my first involvement. The second involvement is and that comes closer, literally closer to home. So that would have been 1966. 1977 I go to Mozambique. 1988 I'm blown up. So I come back to England now as a refugee the second time. There's a wonderful organization, used to be called the Society for Protection of Science and Learning. I think it's now called CARA. Same kind of people. I think I'm the only one who's come onto their books twice. And I'm blown up, I've lost an arm. I'm feeling fantastic. Fantastic. They came for me, they tried to kill me, and I survived. When I told my grandchild this the other day, he said, Grandpa, that's terrible. I said, no, it's the best day of my life. They tried to kill me and I only lost an arm. So my mood is very, very high, slow physical recovery, and now I leave everything behind in Mozambique. Big art collection, you could buy amazing art. You couldn't buy a cup or a saucer or a pillowcase, but you could buy art. So I'm accumulating art, and I turn up, even my little suitcase didn't arrive, so I'm literally in my bandages, me and my bandages, like naked you come into the world, naked you go out, naked I come back into the world, and I could feel that excitement. Look, Mommy, I can stand. Look, Mommy, I can write. It was like that sense of being rejuvenated, reborn. And after a couple of months now, I'm out in the world. And Shula Marx, then the director of Institute of Commonwealth Studies, comes with Mary Simons, a South African, who's been also working, I think, at the ICwS. They come and see me, and I'm very buoyant, very chipper. Albie, what are you going to do now? I don't know what I'm going to do. And I said, I've been offered, I think, Warwick University, a fellowship for 3 months, and for some reason, the University of Canterbury for 6 months. What would you like to do? I said, I would love to work on preparing for a new constitution for South Africa. And Shula said, fantastic. We've got a bathroom upstairs. We can convert it into an office. We'll get money from Ford Foundation and from Swedish International Development Agency. So that's why they don't have baths anymore in the Institute of Commonwealth Studies. The spirit is taken over from the body. That thing what would you like to do? Not many people get that chance. What would you like to do? And not many people get asked that, and not many people actually have the opportunity to do what you want. So that was now late 88. It was called the South African Constitutional Studies Center. So it goes through the initials. It's the Sachs Center. But that was purely coincidental. And it was another marvelous space for me. I could just sit and think, meet people, write, and it was wonderful. I'm totally part of the struggle. The struggle is my life. It's almost my death. But I can think about the struggle. I can think about ideas. And I'm in a marvelous space. If you're writing something inside the organization, it's for the organization. You've got to be so careful about what you say, and it goes through different people reading it, and it ends up bland. And when you've been blown up, you don't want to be bland. If I can't say it now, when am I going to say it? You feel like irreverent, you feel cheeky, you feel great. I've got through that. They can call me bourgeois, that was the worst adjective that could be thrown at you. Call me bourgeois, I don't care. And I picked up different themes. And they range from, the most famous became judges and gender. Now the women's movement is coming through very, very strongly. The theme of sexism now, it's not just racism we're combating, and it's complicated. And like racism is complicated because it enters into your life relationship, sexism is also complicated because it's who you are and how you connect with people, and it's very personal. You can't be more intimate than that in relation, and you can't be more public than that. And I made a statement there. The only truly non-racial institution in South Africa is patriarchy. And I'm making a very powerful point there, because many people would speak about traditional African society as very patriarchal, and they're associating patriarchy with a kind of deformed traditionalism that had been strongly reinforced by apartheid, that liked strong black leaders that reported to Pretoria and diminished the role of women, and the whites themselves were very patriarchal. I mean, I could explore those ideas. I could deal with freedom of speech. It was easy to denounce censorship. My thesis, which I like to believe is a reasonably good book and a reasonably good thesis, was published by Heinemann's, University of California Press, Sussex University Press, and it was banned in South Africa. It was a criminal offense for anybody to possess my thesis. The funny thing is, that's when people read it. It was smuggled in and devoured it. When it was unbanned afterwards, everybody forgot about it. But the question of hate speech, and speech that wounds and undermines people for being who they are, that reinforces intense memories of being diminished in society and being treated as not full human beings. We've got to deal with that in a constitutionally apt way. The future of Roman Dutch law. I hated the term Roman Dutch law. It looks very important. But it's a law that deals with stabbing and killing and divorcing and corporations and a whole range of things. It becomes part and parcel of everyday life. But what we need is a South African law with a different constitutional foundation, but we can use lots of the elements that have been. The future of whites in South Africa, and projecting the idea of whites becoming not whites but human beings in South Africa. So whites are not victims, they're not an enemy per se, but they're people who need to live under and hopefully embrace new values. And there's a great future for whites. So it's not, the struggle is not about existence and survival, which is the way they want to project it. The terrorists are going to kill us. The struggle is about liberating. And it would be very moving for me to see young black people in my organization, ANC, saying, and we will liberate the whites. We liberate them from their whiteism and enable them to become emancipated human beings. And seeing that as a victory, not a concession, not a bowing down because they're powerful and we need their skills, but as a victory for our ideals. It was very, so can you see why I'm getting excited now, just remembering the chance to be able to write these things. And so that's all associated with, I should mention, another aspect of life in England was the nursing I got through the National Health Service. And I mention it whenever I can, actually. My first years in England, I had wonderful friendships here. There was a great anti-apartheid movement. We campaigned, I learned things, I studied. It's a very, I didn't say I'm in exile, I'm living in exile as a South African. And I'm going to absorb everything I can to take back home with me. I never had problems with divided identity as a South African, but submerging myself, immersing myself as much as I can to take back as much as I could. So I had, in that sense, a very, very positive experience. But the nurses gave me something more. I learned to love England. Just the way they washed my wounds, handled me, touched me, the physical hands-on. And it wasn't just they were nice people and well trained. It had something to do with that NHS, you know, a side of British life that was giving and generous and part and parcel of a fabric that was very, very meaningful for me. So these are things that are all like setting me up. Now, one of the funds, maybe, let me just carry on. Part of the fun of being in the Institute of Commonwealth Studies was people came from all over the Commonwealth. And I'm meeting people now. I remember there was a woman, Caribbean, and her big theme was women, poets and writers in the Caribbean. And she said, we are the others of the other. It's the first time I've heard that phrase. But raising it as an issue. So it was a time of Naipaul and others were emerging as powerful writers. But she's saying, hey, what about us? And that was like exciting for me. Then there was this very bright, brilliant person from Sri Lanka. We just called her Chandrika. Wow, her parents, Bandaranaike, had been president, assassinated, mother assassinated, dramatic background. But when you're in exile, you can be a daughter of 2 presidents. You're in exile. I met the king of Lesotho in exile. He wasn't at the ICS. He was a king, but now he's in exile. I still remember actually in particular the day I met him. I'd been his supervisor for Warwick University when I was in Mozambique. He was doing an LLM. He never got past just having nice chats. We'd sit at a long table. There was a little bit like Louis XIV, you know, and I'd be, not sure, Voltaire, whoever it was, conversations. He never did any coursework. But now he's in exile. And I was late for the dinner that he'd arranged for me. So I went home, put my necktie in my pocket, and I got there, and it was the Dorchester, so you could dine without a necktie. So we had a third person there, also from the Constitution Committee of the ANC. So I don't think I called her Your Majesty, but I said, could he help me? I can't tie my tie. And I never had a king tie a necktie for me. And that was my moment. And Nat Masamola, that damn idiot, jumped up and said, no, let me do that. So I lost out on that. But I mentioned that to say, in exile, from that point of view, you could be the ex, whatever it is, or wherever. It's usually democratic in that sense. And I did meet Chandrika some years later in Colombo, and now she's president. I preferred Chandrika in exile. Because she invites me to her parlor, whatever it is, and she's talking, have a marvelous conversation, and I discover after the whole cabinet has been sitting for 45 minutes waiting for her to come. So she's not in exile. And now she's like the queen of a very brilliant, marvelous person, and did a lot for her country and paid a price, and family paid a price. But one sees all, you know, those kind of contradictions. The last little anecdote I'll mention is I'm dropping the names of royals now. Meeting Queen Elizabeth, and the Queen, as I think most of you will know, had a very strong feeling for the Commonwealth. So Shula says, Albie, are you free at such an hour, certain Friday afternoon? Fine. Come to the ICwS. You'll be searched. You'll get on a bus. We're going to Buckingham Palace. So there's quite a big lineup of us. I think most of us would call ourselves Republicans, but the chance to meet the Queen, why not? And we go there, there's quite a long line, and you're told what to do, and you've got 35 seconds or 42 seconds with Her Majesty, and I'm waiting in line, and I mentioned to her now to use my time. Oliver Tambo, the president of the ANC, has said that if democracy is achieved in South Africa, we could very well want to come back into the Commonwealth. And I got a little nod from her, so I managed to politicize even that tiny occasion. So that's part and parcel of that assembly, if you like, of memories that come back. But a warm time for me, a productive time for me, and it's wonderful. What would you like to do? This is what I would like to do, and ICwS made it possible for me to do. And it came out in a book, Protecting Human Rights in New South Africa, which is now, so that came out in 1990. How many years ago is that?
35?
35 years ago. It's on sale at the Museum of Contemporary African Art, where they've got an exhibition now called Spring is Rebellious, the art and life of Albie Sachs. And I bought up some remainder copies afterwards, and now it's on sale there. So that cycle of reproduction of ideas continues.
Thanks, Albie. Just to pick up on a couple of things that you recounted, and going also back to that that time. Long before I had the privilege of meeting you, I knew of your name as someone in the legal world who had really worked on furthering the protection of the rights of women. And when I was reading your book and reading more deeply about your life, I saw that you were writing about this long before many other people were writing about it. And you co-authored a book called Sexism and the Law, and it talked about perspectives in the male judiciary in the UK and in the US in the 1970s. And I just wondered, maybe you can tell us why did you take that journey? Why did you go on that journey? And maybe mention one or two of the women who have been influential in your life along that path.
The spark for writing that book, Sexism and the Law, was reading the autobiography of Sylvia Pankhurst. And I'm not sure what led me there, but I had a fairly special attraction. I was drawn to the suffragettes. And it was the nature of their struggles. They didn't have guns, they didn't have money, they only had their bodies. And they used their bodies for hunger strikes, throwing oneself under the king's horse. There was something so pure and against disdain. The enemy wasn't simple brute force. It was a huge mental cloak of exclusion and what was expected, and of being unladylike and unfeminine. It just reached me. So there's a footnote, page 24 or something in her book. And she says, describes her father, Richard Pankhurst, was the lawyer, and he brought a case in Manchester in 1860 something, I think it was, maybe a little bit later, where a woman presented herself at the voting office for Parliament, and the law says any person who owned property worth £50 or something else is entitled to vote. And she said, I'm a person, I've got property of £50, please put my name on the register. And it goes to the High Court, and the High Court says, sorry, you've got property of £50, but you're not a person. What? And I follow up the person's cases, and they go on now for another 40 years. And it's not just statutes that interpret that way. Bertha Cave gets a very good degree at Oxford, and she applies to be enrolled as a barrister, and the Society of Barristers says, sorry, you can't enroll, it's for men only. And then I discover judges in Scotland where women were allowed to, some women were allowed into medical school by the university. A huge outcry from the men, and the university crumbles. They had allowed women in, provided in anatomy lessons, they sat on one side of a screen, not together with men. And by a majority, it was a very big court, very close majority, the judges say women are not persons. And of course they go on to say, it's not out of disrespect for women, it's out of respect for women. We want to protect them from the hurly-burly, the ugliness. And meanwhile, I'm reading Olive Schreiner, great South African feminist writer, for an African farm, saying women in hospitals clean up. She didn't actually say wipe the asses of the patients and clean up the blood and sweep the floors, but they're too delicate to become doctors. So I'm amazed, doubly amazed. I'm amazed that judges could use that kind of language. persons. I'm amazed it's not well known in England. So many critical legal scholars are speaking about the partiality of judges towards employers. And so if workers go on strike, it's a violation of the rights of employers. And the bias in favor of the wealthy property owners. Nobody's speaking about the bias that is so expressed, so not even implicit, against women. And I'm also feeling England's given me so much. A PhD, place to study, to attend things, to meet people, anti-apartheid struggles and so on. What can I give back to England? And I can give back this story and the importance of anti-sexism. Then I'm interested in getting publication in America, University of California Press, and they say, it's interesting, but it's far away. Can you get somebody to do the equivalent in the United States? And I had a friend, I wanted her to do it, but now being subjected to English culture for a while, so I don't ask her straight out. I say, do you know anybody who might be interested? Give her a chance to say, oh, well, if possibly you would consider me. Being American, she said, well, if he wanted me, he would have asked me. She was dying to do it, but she put me on to somebody else. So somebody else did it in America, and what was interesting, with a totally different legal configuration, with a constitution, fundamental rights, a Bill of Rights, the same answers were given. So the prejudices, the paradigms were exactly the same. The reasoning, the outcomes were the same, but the reason was slightly different. We were always for protection of women. I'm still a bit surprised that the book is not very well known. It's not very well known in England. It just seemed utterly incredible that judges could get away with that. And then I tried to develop a theory of why. And it clearly wasn't for protection of women, because working class women were arguing, trade union leaders were fighting bosses and so on. Working class women were sweeping up and cleaning and banging. It was their own wives and daughters. And at the time when they saw women playing a crucial role in having an establishment which the judges can feel comfortable and welcome, that was the paradigm of women who now be the junior partners of the judges. And they wouldn't want their wives instead jumping up in court like men, but that's the way they would have seen it. I got help from some feminists in America. It's actually very, very painful, slamming me as a man who just doesn't get it. But that's kind of the nature of the game. It became very important inside our struggle, and we had some very powerful, they weren't, powerful doesn't capture it, very brave women in the struggle, because men were saying, of course everybody's equal. And the woman was saying, you expect us to do all the junior tasks so that you can do the fighting. You do the thinking, you carry the guns, you determine the issues, and we support you in all sorts of ways. And we're feeling it. And we want to be equal in every way inside the struggle. And the men say, no, but the big thing is to bring down white supremacy. And the woman, in fact, it was Mary Simons who said to me, we don't want one gang of men to take over from another gang of men when freedom comes in South Africa. So our constitution happens to be certainly the most gender sensitive. It's not protecting rights for women. We had a clause in it, rights for women, and a feminist said, what do you mean rights for women? Aren't women voters? Aren't women workers? Aren't women people who do artists and all the rest? We want a gender sensitivity in relation to every clause in the Constitution, not a separate clause, rights for women. You don't have a clause, rights for men. So I was a strong supporter of all that, and partly because I've been in touch with the women's movement in England, not directly in touch, but affected by the energy and the challenge that they represented. Very, very big for me, and that's another thank you to the UK for me.
Thanks, Albie. In the room, we have a number of students, including some of our students here. And so I wanted to embarrass you a little bit by reading you just a few sentences from your book, and then to ask you a question about it. Right towards the end, you say something that really resonated when I read it. And it was, "This is what happens to you when you join the movement. You put yourself on constant trial, embark on an intimate journey with your fear, self-doubt, and courage. Your imagination feeds on the heroism of others. You imbibe poetry and read prison memoirs and participate in the huge oral tradition of struggle in which the feats of the brave and the clear-sighted establish standards of conduct and personal morality that both inspire and terrify you at the same time." And when I read that, I reflected on the fact that the Institute of Commonwealth Studies has a master's program in human rights, the practice of human rights. And it's by distance learning, and the director of that program, Corinne, is here with us tonight. And we have students all over the world. And I was wondering, perhaps talking to our students, you could maybe recommend who they should read as part of that grand oral tradition of struggle, which you, of course, now yourself are a part of. And perhaps a reflection on who inspires you today in 2025, because I think the world is full of trouble and becoming more complex, and we're all looking for guidance from people like yourself as to how we might be inspired.
Read Albie Sachs. And I put it there for a very, very strong reason. I was very proud to be a member of the freedom struggle. We messed up in lots of ways. I defended the indefensible internationally, a lot of issues. We had a tunnel vision, maybe. I think you can't survive. If you're in the underground, you need a tunnel vision. We had lots of disappointments. We had people who went on to become autocratic, powerful, even sometimes horrible. All of that was there. But at its core was something very beautiful, very deep, very rich. It's got ideological dimensions, but it's not ideology. It's not an idea, it's an experience. It's a connectivity with others. It's a feeling of being more myself when I'm part of a project wider than myself. Not less. I'm not losing myself in the struggle. I'm actually blossoming in the struggle with others who are very different from me. And there's a core of elation because it's the finest sides of yourself and your beliefs that are involved. That was written at a time when oppression was still heavy in South Africa. And some of the people I loved and admired the most, they picked up guns. I'm a pacifist at heart. I supported the armed struggle. I had such admiration for them. And the hints of that, putting your life on the line as part and parcel. Now in South Africa, I was saying quite recently, the paradox of our lives, I said that in 1989 before we came back, is that we're fighting with all our passion to create a boring society. I was kind of aware of that. So that little bit part of still the society resisting, the revolutionary, the transforming everything, the giving of yourself, connecting yourself totally with others. And I'm not so sure I could write that. I can remember that for my life today. But certainly for those of you here, if you can see just being in a struggle for a better world as something valuable in itself, with maybe the biggest blessings that come from, you don't even know what they're going to be or how they'll manifest themselves. But it's just a sense of richness. Many of you might get it from your religion, your religious beliefs. And it could be that same sense of elation, of being on a path of goodness, of significance. That's the way I'm secular, so I don't get it from a hereafter, from a sacred text, from anything else like that. So you've influenced me. A book that did have a very big influence on me was Gandhi's My Experiments with Truth. I'm not a Gandhian. I would have been if I had to align myself more on the Nehru side in terms of state structures and instruments and so on. But there was something about his naivety that reached me very, very strongly. A certain kind of honesty and a questing. And particularly the book he wrote about his 20 years in South Africa was very, very lovely. Maybe before the end of the evening, some other thoughts will come back to me about what you should read.
Another question for the students, perhaps. You mentioned already Schüler Marx coming up to you in around 1988 and saying, what would you like to do? What would you like to work on? What a powerful question that was. And I was wondering, sitting here in 2025, some decades later, and you now being in Cape Town but travelling the world, if a young student came up to you and said, Albie, what do you think I should work on? What do you think needs working on in South Africa or in the world at the moment? What sort of guidance might you give them?
Okay, I am prepared to offer advice, not quite the advice that you're suggesting. We're told to follow our dreams. And my advice is not to follow that advice. Don't follow your dreams. If you think of the actual dreams, I know when I was a young boy, my dream was to become a killer, a soldier flying a Messerschmitt, dropping bombs, to rescue princesses. Now, it's kind of grotesque and awful. And I've done things that I've never dreamt of. I never dreamt of becoming a judge. I never even imagined it. I love being a judge. It happened maybe because I didn't dream of it. I didn't work for it. I didn't want to get there. And life kind of catapulted me in that direction. So I say, don't follow your dreams. I'd say to the young people, and the not so young people, and even the elderly people, follow your life and your dreams will follow you. And that's what's really saying is follow something inside yourself. Develop it, take risks, go with it, take chances, and then things will happen. If you're following your dreams, it's to be like somebody else. And you're not going to be like somebody else. You can be more yourself and create yourself than trying to be like somebody else. And I don't think that's even the measure that people should have.
I want to ask you just now about the gift that you have given the Institute of Commonwealth Studies, and you heard from Claire, our Dean, that it is the preamble to the post-apartheid South Africa Constitution that you were thinking about when you were at the Institute. And so your fingerprints are all over it. And I urge all of you to have a read when you leave, because the language is inspirational. United in our diversity, heal the harms of the past. And a lot of important treaties and legal instruments, as you know, have powerful preambles. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Rome Statute, the UN Charter. And I just wonder if you could say a few words about the process of drafting that preamble and where you took inspiration from, and was it as part of a team, and were the discussions difficult? Do you recall that time when you were writing?
Yes, I recall it very, very vividly. A big advantage we had was the South African setup was so terrible that it wasn't something that had to be amended. Cutting out some bad things, adding a few nice things. A total clean slate, completely, from beginning to end. Once you're doing that, you can also start thinking new ways of thinking. And most of the post-colonial constitutions drafted at Lancaster House or wherever, very laconic. Don't use more words than you need. Set up the structures so people know what they've got to do and what's being accomplished. No emotion, no passion, no feeling. That's all somehow antithetical to the nature of law and fundamental rights. And I felt, all that pain, all that striving, all that hope, all the singing, all the emotion, all the dancing, all the dreams, all the solidarity, that's where it's coming from. That's the lifeblood of our constitutional order, not just how Parliament is created and what people can do, writing and speaking and so on. I had the sense of the transition from cold, laconic, racist, autocratic structure to an empathetic, human-based, loving and lovable document that honors those who died, who were tortured to death, who were assassinated, who struggled, jailed for years and years. So already in exile on the Constitutional Committee of the ANC, or as soon as we came back, I said we've got to have a strong preamble. And I started drafting. I'm sure quite a few of those were my words. One day someone can get a PhD going through the documents at the University of Western Cape and seeing the different drafts and so on. But the idea came very strongly from me and was picked up by my colleagues. Picked up very, very strongly. And it fits in, we wouldn't start a meeting without revolutionary songs. You couldn't start a meeting without songs and ending without songs. The musicality. So this is, if you like, the musicality of law, the musicality of transition, the musicality of idealism is coming through. But it's doing more than that. It's registering our passion in the struggle and our vision. And it's telling future judges, I grew up with a bulging, I didn't have a smart bag now with wheels and so on, a bag that my mother gave me, Advocate A.L. Sachs, stamped in gold on the bag. And it couldn't take very much. It would have one textbook on criminal law and procedure, one on civil law and procedure, and then you'd have the dictionaries. And so much of legal work was interpreting the meaning of words. What did Parliament intend? It's to move away completely from that objective meaning of words being applied to real life people to words having a meaning in a context. And it's a literal context, it's a structural context of the Constitution, it's a context of the society we're living in, and the pains and the hopes in that society. So our Constitution, now the whole first section, it's not just the preamble. We have the preamble that's very beautiful. We have 4 fundamental features, very, very powerful. And then we have a Bill of Rights. And there's something like 26 themes in the Bill of Rights before you get to the institutions. And that's telling the judges and the legislators and the administrators and the executive, this value system is what's guiding the constitutional project. And those are your duties and responsibilities, and that's the way the court has to interpret the law. So this is all part and parcel of a vision. It's not just this crazy visionary Albie goes into the desert for 40 days and wakes up with a vision and comes back and says, hooray. It's a vision that emerged from, I suppose it's a struggle, people have struggled memory against forgetting. It's the struggle of words against reality. To imbue words with reality, but find the words that can truly embody reality. And that tension comes through with a certain resonance in the constitutional text.
I'll just ask you one more question, Albie, before we ask our friends in the room. Perhaps they have some before we finish. But I've always been curious about the judicial decision-making process. And suddenly, later in your life, you find yourself as a constitutional court judge. You're sitting on a bench with a row of colleagues, and you are asked to deal with some very difficult societal issues such as same-sex marriage. And I think the world today is becoming even more and more politicized and more polarized, and reaching unanimity on issues like that is so difficult. And so I was wondering what reflections you have for judges and those who are involved in the judicial process when they are sitting together in the modern world looking at issues that are of societal importance and maybe not seeking unanimity but dealing with these issues. What advice or what reflections you would have about that?
It was a wonderful experience. I've had lots of wonderful experiences. And just as you've got to take risks, you've got to be open to wonder and willing to take it. At times very painful. For quite a long time I wasn't seen as a real judge. There's a very big press campaign against me from the liberal press, not from conservative press, not from the black press. The black press wanted me on the court. So it wasn't easy. It was very moving. 11 of us, maybe 3 or 4 would say we are completely secular. 7, 8, religion means a lot to them. It's why they are involved in human rights. There's a direct connection. Very, very different. Our life experiences. Laurie Ackerman, his hobby was collecting wine labels. Not even wine labels. You can't get more refined than that. I'm driving in Durban. I've just got back from exile with Pius Langer. He's then just an advocate. And we pass a building, a small building. He said, oh, by the way, Albie, that was the native pass office. When he was 16, he told me, he had to go there to get a pass. Without a pass, you couldn't move, you couldn't get a job. And he said they strip you naked, they wash you down, hose you down, they feel your testicles. That's not very nice, but you're 16, that's life. He said to see men old enough to be my father going through that, he said he couldn't bear that. He was a marvelous colleague. He had that sensibility, that kind of quality. We're all sitting on the same bench. And what brings us together is the Constitution. And this isn't just a constitution we happen to have. It's the constitution our generation created. And Laurie did excellent work as a judge on the old apartheid court. He stepped down, became professor of human rights, very interested in Immanuel Kant, and he would derive his background reasoning from a totally different. You know, I'm heavily influenced by Marxism. No matter, his wife was professor of theology at Stellenbosch University. I'm going to say, but but she was a feminist, and she was the first woman to wear jeans at Stellenbosch University. And it's moving to me that people with very different philosophical foundations, very different life experiences, can agree on an interpretation of what the Constitution means in a particular setting. It's very encouraging, very encouraging. And maybe because we were all from that generation that resisted apartheid, we didn't have Republicans and Democrats, and I don't know how you describe the differences, but you know, pro-executive, pro-individual, some a little bit more, some a little less. We didn't have that, and to this day we don't have those differences. Some little more literal, some a little more purposive. We developed the notion of purposive reasoning. That was absolutely fundamental. Not literal reasoning, what do the words actually say, but what do they say in the context of that Constitution produced at this time in our lives in a country that's riven with these problems and the other problems. And so using this kind of methodology, we started finding agreement. When we started, we couldn't use South African precedent. We couldn't use the whole panoply of racist laws, even with good judges. It was a toxic foundation. We don't want to pick up a few drops of enlightenment from a toxic setting. But we were encouraged by our Constitution to look at law throughout the world. The American consulate gave us Lawrence Tribe. Each one got a set of Larry Tribe, and the French consulate gave us Peter Hogg. And Canada had a Bill of Rights in '82, Pierre Trudeau, partly his view of making Quebecois feel part of the whole of Canada. You'd all have fundamental rights, whether you're French speaking or English speaking. And to some extent, I think it worked to help create a kind of patriotism based on fundamental rights for everybody. They had a brilliant Supreme Court, headed by Dixon and Bertha Cave, who came from Scotland, in fact. She, Presbyterian socialist, never been trained as a lawyer, worked as a legal librarian, strong feminist, working with this very, very clever person. And we could draw from their jurisprudence. We looked to the Indian Supreme Court that had passion and feeling and a sense of that broader vision of a constitution. We got something from the European Court of Human Rights. We looked to international law instruments. So it's not just Albie and Laurie and Pius. It's drawing on. And not to say the Americans, more and more we look to their minority positions on capital punishment and elsewhere. We're not bound by what they're saying. If they can say it better than we can say it, to capture what our Constitution is saying, we can use it. So all of these things helped us to create a methodology. We found proportionality, which was something we'd never heard of before, except for self-defense a little bit. Now became central to everything that we did. You have a right, but it can be limited if it's justifiable. All depends on context and degree and impact. And so we were able to create a platform. The judges now look at what Sachs said, in the minority or the majority, and that helped to create a new kind of jurisprudence. It's been hugely exciting for me to see our decisions quoted in courts internationally. Some by the House of Lords here in England. I went to Ukraine before the fighting started there, and the Ukrainian judge on the European Court of Human Rights said they look to the South African Constitutional Court. I met one of the judges on the Federal Constitutional Court in Germany, a very powerful court. She said exactly the same thing. So we did create something that I think relates to our history, relates to the very special role that law played in oppression, and then afterwards in emancipation. Maybe it gives an intensity to the role and functioning of our Constitution and the courts in South Africa. So all of these things helped. Today, many people in many parts of the world are so disheartened. It's kind of unbelievable, incredible, beyond comprehension that certain things are now happening so against the grain of what seemed to be almost platitudinous, almost too axiomatic to even be defended. I think it's a test for our ideals. And I think it's a test that our ideals are going to come out stronger for. We're not just taking for granted certain things that are just there, automatic. We have to fight to retain them, to develop them, to see the areas where they're not strong enough, they're not resilient enough. Now, I'm an optimist. After I've blown up, I tell myself a joke. Boom, pow, terrible things happening. I'm in darkness. I hear a voice saying, Albie, you're in the Puta Central Hospital, this Irugarido, your arm's in lamentable condition, you must face the future with courage. I was saying to the doctors what happened, and a woman's voice said, it was a car bomb. And I fainted into joy. I thought I'd been kidnapped to be thrown into jail in South Africa. And now I know I'm in the hands of Redeemer, I'm safe. And then some time passes, I'm lying on my back, I'm feeling very light, and I tell myself a joke about Harvey Cohen, like me as a Jew. Some of you might know the joke. He does this, and someone said, Jaime, I didn't know you were Catholic. What do you mean Catholic? Spectacles, testicles, wallet and watch. And for some reason I started with testicles. And that story went round the ANC camps. The first thing Comrade Albie did was reach for his balls. Seemed to be in order. Wallet. Heart's okay, there's a crater in my head, my brain's not damaged. Watch, I've only lost an arm. I've only lost an arm. Now people say that's indication of an optimist. I've only lost an arm. But that's the way I felt, that moment you're waiting for. Will they come for me? Will I be brave? Will I get through? You're not consciously, you're not praying. It's not overt, but your soul is there all the time. They tried to kill me and they failed. And I had a total conviction as I got better, my country would get better. And that kind of came to pass. All of which is to say, the optimism in me, it's in me, and it's in my experience. But we got our constitution, we got our court, we put up a beautiful building on the site of an old prison where Gandhi and Mandela had been locked up. We South Africans brag, we have the only jail in the world where both Gandhi and Mandela were locked up, and that's where we built our court. So these have been visible outcomes directly involved with my life that have succeeded. When the world at that stage gave South Africa less chance than Northern Ireland, less chance than Israel, Palestine, less chance, and we got it. So that's the source of our optimism. And the rights that we've got were hard fought for in our country. And the fundamental human rights have been fought for by people in generations all over the world, in many different formats and so on. And they come through, and I feel they are well entrenched, they are deep. And they're deep not just because it makes you a good person, because that's what you believe in. They're deep because they've responded to human aspirations and needs. And they'll continue to do that. And we're going to need those things in future. So the people who are trying to bring it down or disregard it or override it or whatever verb or adjective you use, I don't think they're going to succeed. I don't think they're going to succeed. And there will be setbacks, maybe quite grievous setbacks, but I think the roots are deep. And the roots are deep in human experience, in human accomplishment, in instruments that human beings have forged to deal with pain and injustice and suffering and alienation. The only problem is if I get despondent, then you know it's over. Then you must go to Mars.
I mean, that is itself such a strong note to end on, and I'm going to be very strict with time, Albie, because I know that you have a tight schedule and we only have 4 more minutes. So I'm not sure we can really go to the room and have questions and do that process justice. But I think this has already been such a terrific conversation. And before I bring matters to a close, I don't know if there was anything else you would like to say finally, since we're not going to questions to the room.
Well, just an odd thing. I set the time limit originally, and it's Albie, who fought very hard for the right to be secular, surrounded by very pious, very frum little Jewish boys. And I said it's Yom Kippur is starting tonight, and it means nothing to me, but it's part of history for people who are close to me, and that I don't want to be seen as being disrespectful to Yom Kippur. For those who don't know, it's the most holy day, the day of start the fasting, and it's of day of repentance, of atonement. And some people are saying there's lots to atone for these days. So thank you for giving me a chance to. The nasty term is vent. The nice term is ventilate. I felt very at home here.
I'm so pleased
I
to hear.
felt anybody who's crazy enough to go out in a rather dismal day to listen to Albie Sachs can't be all bad. So thanks for giving me a chance to remember things that are truly memorable for me. And thank you, Kingsley, to yourself. It's a new friend. It's wonderful to make new friends when you're 90. I advise all of you to go in for that.
Thank you, Albie. It's a huge honour and a privilege for all of us. And just a word to you all, thank you all for coming on behalf of the University of London, the School of Advanced Study. We also really appreciate you.